Yarik Weller could barely see through the fogged visor of his helmet. The swamp planet, officially designated L672C, unofficially called Ball by the crew of the TSS Halberd, was not a place you visited voluntarily. It reeked of sulfur and rot, buzzed with insects the size of golf balls, and was humid enough to make your bones sweat. But somewhere in this noxious jungle, an alien distress signal had been detected, and Yarik had been sent down to check it out. He trudged forward, boots squelching in the mud, pulse rifle slung across his back. The scanner on his wrist blinked erratically. Whatever had triggered the signal was close now. He adjusted the dial, swept the area, and froze. A heat signature the size of a shuttle was moving just 100 meters ahead. "Halberd, this is Weller," he said into his comm. "I've got a large bioform ahead of me. Still approaching. No obvious tech. I'm going in for visual." Static crackled back. No reply. He sighed, adjusted his grip on the rifle, and pushed through the tangled underbrush. The massive creature came into view slowly, like a mountain uncoiling from sleep. It was quadrupedal, covered in thick fur matted with swamp scum, and easily 15 feet tall at the shoulder. Its eyes glowed amber in the gloom, locked onto him without blinking. Yarik didn't move. The creature sniffed the air, then let out a low growl that shook the leaves overhead. A voice crackled from his right, not from the comm, but from a translator speaker. "Do not engage. That is the Corvex Alpha. It will kill you in under 3 seconds." Yarik turned. Standing just 10 paces away was a tall, green-scaled alien with elongated limbs and a glimmering harness of tools. Its eyes were narrow slits, its mouth a small horizontal line that barely moved when it spoke. "You're the one who sent the distress signal?" Yarik asked. "I am entry of the Ossen Collective. And yes, I lured it here, hoping to trap it. I failed." The Corvex Alpha took a step forward, its massive paw sinking into the mud. Yarik raised his rifle instinctively, but Entry held up a clawed hand. "You cannot kill it. It recognizes aggression. It will respond in kind." Yarik lowered the weapon slowly. "Then what do you suggest?" Entry hesitated. "Humans are resilient, yes? Adaptable? Perhaps. Try to confuse it. That is your kind's skill, is it not?" Yarik blinked. "Confuse it?" The Corvex growled again and took another step. Yarik dropped the rifle, pulled off his helmet, and knelt down. He reached into his thigh pouch and pulled out a protein bar. It was chocolate-coated and smelled faintly of peanuts. He unwrapped it, held it out in both hands, and said, "Hey, big guy. You hungry?" Entry made a strangled noise. "You are offering it food." The beast sniffed, leaned in, and gently took the bar from Yarik's hand. It chewed once, then twice. Then it sat. Just sat. Its tail thumped in the mud. Yarik blinked. A moment passed. Then the Corvex leaned its massive head down and nosed at Yarik's shoulder, huffing warm breath into his face. Its eyes half-lidded. It rolled onto its side, exposed its belly, and gave a low, rumbling chuff. "You've got to be kidding me," Yarik muttered. "It is requesting a belly rub," Entry said, his voice high with disbelief. "It believes you are a friend." Yarik glanced up at the towering alien. "You said this thing was the most dangerous beast your people had ever encountered." "It is. It has killed 20 of our warriors. It cannot be bribed, intimidated, or reasoned with." "Well," Yarik said, kneeling beside the massive belly and hesitating only a moment before rubbing it gently, "maybe you just never tried being nice." The Corvex let out a sound like a purring engine. Entry stared for a long moment, then slowly sat down in the mud, his eyes wide. "This will upend centuries of xenobiology." The Corvex began snoring. Back aboard the TSS Halberd, Yarik stood in the decontamination chamber, wrapped in a towel, while Captain Darnes blinked at him through the glass. "You rubbed its belly?" "Yes." "And gave it a snack?" "Yes." "And then it followed you back to the shuttle like a puppy?" "Pretty much." Darnes rubbed his temples. "The Ossen Collective is transmitting proposals. They want you to return to their capital and demonstrate your technique." Yarik groaned. "I didn't do anything special. You fed the deadliest creature on their planet a chocolate bar and scratched its tummy. That's diplomacy now." The decontamination cycle ended with a hiss. The doors slid open as Yarik stepped out. 3 days later, he was standing in the Ossen capital of Virex, surrounded by towering crystalline spires and a sea of green-scaled aliens. The core of X-Alpha, now dubbed Muffin by the halberd crew, sat beside him, tongue lolling. Entry stood at a podium, addressing a crowd of thousands. The human Weller has achieved what our finest could not. He pacified the beast. Not with violence, not with technology, but with kindness. Yarik leaned over to Muffin. We are never living this down. Muffin licked his face. The demonstration was less a show and more a circus. Muffin performed lazy roles, accepted treats from nervous Ossen scientists, and wagged his massive tail when Yarik called his name. The Ossen were baffled, delighted, and deeply confused. Several requested samples of human food. Others asked to examine Yarik's scent profile. Afterward, in the palace gardens, Entry approached him again. I must ask, he said, how did you know it would accept the food rather than devour you? I didn't, Yarik replied. I figured if it was going to kill me, standing there with a rifle wasn't going to change anything. Entry stared at him. This is human logic? No. This is me being tired, hungry, and out of options. Entry nodded slowly. Remarkable. Later that night, Yarik sat on a bench in the guest compound, watching Muffin snore under a tree. He was nursing a swollen ankle from where Muffin had stepped on him during a particularly enthusiastic roll. A small Ossen child approached cautiously, holding out a strip of jerky. Can I feed him? Yarik nodded. Be gentle. No sudden moves. The child crept forward, offered the jerky, and Muffin took it delicately, eyes half closed. The child giggled and patted his nose. Yarik smiled, then winced as he shifted his leg. Still hurts? Entry asked, coming to sit beside him. Yeah, got checked earlier. Nothing broken, just bruised. Going to limp for a week, though. You are not deterred? I've had worse. Besides, he didn't mean it. Entry looked at Muffin. We feared this creature for centuries. You made it safe. I didn't make it anything, Yarik said. I just treated it like it wasn't a monster. Entry was quiet for a long moment. There are others. Beasts we fear. Perhaps. You would be willing to help? Yarik groaned. Please tell me none of them are venomous, invisible, or have more than 4 legs. Entry didn't answer. Yarik buried his face in his hands. Why do I feel like I just became the galaxy's dog whisperer? Muffin burped. Entry said, because you did. Yarik sighed. I need a raise. By early morning, the Ossen capital had begun to smell faintly of roasted grain and ionized air. Strange combination, Yarik thought, but then again, so is everything else around here. He sat on a low bench carved from a single slab of translucent bonewood, his left foot propped on a cushion someone had kindly if awkwardly stitched together from moss cloth and what looked suspiciously like old banners. His ankle still throbbed, but the swelling had gone down since the medtechs wrapped it 2 days ago. They hadn't used much in the way of painkillers, just a local anesthetic and some sort of biogel that smelled like mint and iron, but it worked. Mostly. Yarik was halfway through a pouch of dried fish, which he'd bartered from a vendor by handing over a spare bootlace, and a very confused look when Entry arrived again. This time, the Ossen wore a deep blue sash across his chest, embroidered with symbols Yarik hadn't seen before. Maybe ceremonial. Maybe laundry tags. We have a situation, Entry said without preamble. One of the other apex specimens has been sighted near the northern nutrient fields. It is a Tavaran spinecrawler. Not compatible with belly rubs. Yarik chewed slowly. Let me guess. It's immune to projectiles, breathes fire, and hates kindness. It spits acid and climbs vertical surfaces at alarming speeds. It also has a documented history of luring prey by mimicking distress calls, including ours. And you think I'm supposed to go out there and... What? Talk it into therapy? No. We think you might confuse it long enough for us to tag it with a suppressant dart. The biologists believe your presence alters behavioral outcomes. You mean it hesitates because it doesn't understand what I'm doing. Essentially, you are unpredictable. That makes you valuable. Fantastic. I've always aspired to be an interstellar distraction. Entry handed him a small metallic disc. It was smooth, cool, and pulsed faintly with internal light. This will track your vitals. Should you be incapacitated, it will emit a distress pulse. We will retrieve you. Eventually. Comforting. They left the city aboard a narrow skimmer that buzzed like a hornet and smelled like scorched kelp. Yarik gritted his teeth through every jolt and turn. The pilot, a jittery Ossen youth named Vec, kept glancing at him, as if he might start juggling explosives at any moment. The nutrient fields stretched out in uneven terraces, coated in a thick fibrous growth that resembled algae crossed with barbed wire. Several Asen workers stood at a distance, gesturing toward a large ventilation shaft that jutted from the hillside like a broken tooth. "It went in there," one hissed. "We heard it mimic a hatchling's cry." Then silence. Yarik stared at the shaft. "How big is it?" "Wide enough for a spine crawler to fit comfortably. Narrow enough that you'll have to crouch." "Of course." They handed him a pair of infrared goggles, a stun baton with 3 settings: futile, desperate, and hope you're lucky, and a small pouch of dried meat strips. He raised an eyebrow. "In case it's hungry," the worker explained. Yarik adjusted the goggles and ducked into the shaft. The walls were slick with condensation and smelled faintly of copper. Every few meters, the tunnel curved or branched. He moved slowly, keeping one hand on the wall, the other gripping the baton. 10 minutes in, he heard it. A soft, high-pitched whimper. Just once. He froze. Another sound followed, something wet and heavy sliding across metal. He crouched lower, letting his back press against the wall. The goggles stuttered briefly, then adjusted. Movement flickered ahead: long, jointed limbs, a segmented body, and a head like an upside-down horseshoe crab. The spine crawler stopped abruptly. Its head tilted. Yarik didn't move. The creature let out a new sound, something between a cough and a purr. Then, slowly, it began to advance. He reached into the pouch and pulled out one of the meat strips. With exaggerated care, he placed it on the floor. The spine crawler paused. Its mandibles twitched. It sniffed. Then it hissed. "Okay, no snacks," Yarik muttered, backing up a step. The creature surged forward. Yarik dropped to the floor, rolled under a pipe, and swung the baton upward. It connected with a crack and a flash of blue light. The spine crawler shrieked and recoiled, skittering backward with unnatural grace. He scrambled to his feet and ran. The tunnel narrowed, forcing him to duck and slide. Somewhere behind him, claws scraped metal. The sound was getting closer. He turned left, then right, then down a steep incline, barely keeping his footing. Suddenly, the floor gave out beneath him. He fell 6 feet into a sump chamber, landing hard on his right side. Pain shot through his ribcage. He tried to inhale and got half a breath before coughing violently. Above, the spine crawler peered down from the ledge, its eyes glowing. Yarik fumbled for the baton. It wasn't there. The creature began to descend. He reached into his vest and pulled out the disc Entry had given him. It was blinking faster now, picking up his elevated heart rate. He pressed the center. Nothing happened. Typical. The spine crawler reached the bottom and crept forward. It was close enough now that he could see the fine hairs on its limbs, the glistening of its fangs. It didn't attack. It just watched. He sat up slowly, clutching his ribs. "What are you waiting for?" The creature hissed softly. Yarik did the only thing that came to mind. He laughed. Not loudly, not maniacally, just a low, breathless chuckle that echoed in the sump chamber like a challenge. The spine crawler hesitated. He pulled another meat strip from the pouch and tossed it aside. Then he lay back, hands open, staring at the ceiling. The spine crawler crept forward, sniffed the strip, then tilted its head at him again. Something buzzed overhead. A second later, a dart embedded itself in the creature's thorax. It reared up, shrieked once, and collapsed. A rope dropped from above, followed by Entry, who looked mildly surprised. "You survived." "Barely." "Did you insult it?" "Honestly, I think I confused it into submission." They dragged the spine crawler out with help from the workers. It was heavy and smelled like vinegar and burned rubber. Yarik let them do the lifting while he clutched his ribs and tried not to pass out. Back in the city, a medtech scanned him thoroughly and frowned. "You have 2 fractured ribs. One is pressing against your lung. You'll need an infusion sleeve and at least 3 days of rest." "Can I walk?" "Not without pain." "Good enough." They wrapped his chest in a flexible brace that hissed faintly as it adjusted pressure. Breathing was easier now, though every step still felt like being poked with a dull screwdriver. Later, Entry met him in the observation garden, where Muffin was lounging under a sun lamp with a leaf crown on his head. "We've decided to establish a new behavioral research division. You'll be its honorary initiator." Yarik raised an eyebrow. "Does that come with hazard pay?" "No. But it does come with a ceremonial title and a decorative sash." "Does it at least have pockets?" "No," he sighed. "Then I want dental coverage." Entry looked puzzled. "What is dental?" Yarik leaned back against the railing and watched Muffin roll over onto several ceremonial cushions, crushing them instantly. I'll explain it later. The aroma of boiled root fruit and ion-scorched fabric lingered in the air as Yarik eased himself down onto a cushioned bench inside the Asen recovery atrium. The room was circular, lit from above by a wide, pulsing skylight that shifted color every few minutes, currently a soft amber. His ribs ached with every breath, but the brace kept him from folding in half when he sneezed, which he'd done twice this morning and regretted both times. A gelatinous drink sat untouched at his side, fizzing faintly. He'd been told it aided bone regeneration, but it had the consistency of melted rubber and the color of regret. He poked it once with a spoon. It jiggled ominously. Across from him, Entry was pacing in that gliding, unhurried way the Asen had when their minds were working overtime. A small crystalline panel hovered beside him, displaying what looked like a map overlaid with splotches of shifting red and green. "You're walking a trench into the floor," Yarik said, adjusting his foot slightly. His ankle had dulled to a manageable throb, but his ribs still protested if he moved too fast or laughed too hard. "You're not going to like this," Entry replied without stopping. "I didn't like the last thing either, and yet here we are." Entry turned the panel toward him. "We've detected another apex-level presence. This one is moving rapidly. Southwestern quadrant. It appears to be migrating toward the aquatic basins." Yarik blinked. "That's where your water purification arrays are, right? And more critically, the hatchling pools." "Well," Yarik exhaled slowly, "I'm guessing it's not coming over for a swim. We believe it is a Raskellan bloomstalker." "Bloomstalker doesn't sound too bad. It blooms after feeding on anything with a pulse." Yarik leaned back, regretted it immediately, and grunted. "So it's a carnivorous plant?" "Not exactly. Its central mass is plant-like, yes, but it moves via root tendrils and can generate heat bursts to paralyze prey temporarily. It mimics the shimmer of safe zone lighting and emits pheromones that trigger calm responses." "You're telling me it lulls its prey into a nap and then eats them?" "That is an accurate summary." "Great," Yarik said. "So what's the plan?" I'm sensing a theme. We will deploy you via skimmer to the basin perimeter. You'll be given a containment beacon. If you can get close enough to activate it, we can drop a stasis net over the area. And you think it'll go for me? You're warm-blooded, injured, and radiating stress hormones. You might as well arrive wrapped in seasoning." Yarik looked at the untouched gelatin drink. "Can I at least bring a flamethrower?" "No. Fire triggers its defensive spore release." "Of course it does." By late afternoon, the sky had turned a translucent blue-green that shimmered with high-altitude mist. The skimmer ride was smoother this time. Vec, the young pilot, had stopped flinching when Yarik moved, and now only glanced back every few minutes to make sure he hadn't exploded. The aquatic basins were vast shallow pools interconnected by narrow channels, with tree-sized coral growths dotting the edges. The hatchling pools were further in, clearly marked by protective arches and bioluminescent towers. Yarik was dropped at the southern edge, wearing a harness with the containment beacon strapped to his chest. It had one glowing button. There was no backup. He moved slowly, every step calculated to avoid triggering the pain in his ribs. The brace helped, but it didn't mask everything. He hummed quietly to himself an old Terran lullaby, half remembered to keep his breathing steady. The bloomstalker appeared as a shimmer at first. At the far edge of the water, something rippled not the surface, but the air itself. A shifting distortion, like heat over pavement. Then vines emerged, dragging a central bulbous mass behind them. It pulsed faintly. "Definitely not a swimmer," Yarik whispered. The creature paused, its tendrils fanning across the water's edge. One root crept toward a shallow pool, testing. It shimmered again this time, a soft blue glow, nearly identical to the hatchling tower lights. Yarik moved closer, careful not to step on anything too noisy. The creature rotated or maybe just shifted the central mass, turning to face him. From within the translucent membrane, a multitude of orbs blinked open. Not eyes, exactly, but sensory nodes. It began to emit something, a low thrum, just under hearing, that seemed to settle into his bones. His limbs felt heavier. Breathing slowed. His heartbeat, already elevated from exertion, began to calm unnaturally. "Nope," Yarik muttered. He reached for the beacon. The bloomstalker surged forward. He dove sideways, landing hard, jarring his ribs. The pain cleared his head instantly. He pressed the beacon. Nothing happened. He hit it again. Still nothing. The creature was nearly on top of him now, tendrils flaring like seaweed in fast current. One root lashed out, wrapping around his ankle and dragging him toward the mass. He grabbed a rock flat, sharp, and drove it into the root. It released with a wet snap. He rolled, gasping, and yanked the beacon free of the harness. The connector had come loose. He jammed it back in and hit the button. A second later, the air above the basin rippled. A lattice of light collapsed inward with a sound like glass freezing. The bloomstalker froze mid-surge, its tendrils locking. The net shimmered into place, pinning it in a glowing dome. Yarik lay in the mud, breathing hard, ribs screaming. His ankle throbbed again, and his left hand was slick with something that might have been sap or blood. He didn't care. The retrieval team arrived minutes later, guided by the beacon's secondary signal. Entry dropped down beside him, expression unreadable. You're bleeding. So is it. You damaged the beacon. It didn't come with instructions. Entry examined the bloomstalker, now inert under the stasis net. We thought it would attempt to mimic a hatchling. Instead, it mimicked sunlight. That explains why I nearly took a nap in the middle of being eaten. You're lucky you didn't. Yarik coughed once, groaned, and sat up slowly. Don't say that like it's a surprise. Back in the city, he was placed in a medical chamber with a saline drip and a technician who kept tooting softly at his chart. The ribs hadn't worsened, but the impact had bruised his lung. They inserted a micro-drain to keep pressure from building. It stung, but the relief was immediate. Entry visited that evening, carrying a folded cloth bundle. We've decided to retire the Apex containment protocol. Yarik blinked. You're giving up? No. We're changing tactics. Observation through non-confrontational engagement. Based on your results, you're going to send snacks instead of soldiers? Not always. But we will try understanding first. Yarik accepted the bundle. Inside was a sash of deep crimson with a pattern of curling lines. At the center was a stitched image of a large paw and a human hand side by side. Your officially designated companion of adaptive engagement. Is that as ridiculous in your language as it is in mine? Yes. Yarik leaned back, careful not to shift the microdrain. I still want dental coverage. We've arranged a cross-cultural benefit exchange. You now qualify for restorative regrowth services and lifetime access to nutrient infusions. He looked at the gelatin drink on the table. I'll pass. Entry hesitated. You're leaving soon. Yarik nodded. Transport's arriving tomorrow. Earthside rehab, maybe a few weeks of lying very still. You've changed us. Don't get sentimental. We won't forget. Yarik looked at the sash, then back at Entry. Next time, maybe don't lead with the part where I'm bait. Entry tilted his head. Noted. Outside the window, Muffin was curled in a bed of moss, snoring softly, wearing someone's ceremonial headdress like a sleep mask. Yarik smiled without thinking. You know, that one might actually miss me. Entry looked out. We all might. The two sat in silence for a while, the lights above shifting slowly to a warm orange. No alarms. No threats. No Apex anything. Just peace. At last,